Hello, I'm David Munro, Surrey's Police and Crime Commissioner, and welcome to this roadshow, and thank you very much indeed for taking the time to watch us and also, most importantly, to put your questions and comments to us. I'm going to talk for 5 minutes or so, and then I'm going to hand over to Gavin Stevens, Chief Constable of Surrey Police, and lastly, Inspector James Wyatt, who's the Guildford Borough Commander. And then comes the most important bit, of course, which is for you to have your say. And we'll try and answer your questions and comments as honestly and in as much detail as required. So, that's me, David Munro, Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey. You elected me just over 4 years ago as the Commissioner. I've got a number of responsibilities, but my main one, the overarching one, is to hold Surrey Police to account on behalf of residents of Surrey. And to do that, it's critical that I need to find out what you're thinking. And that's why these events are so important. What do you think has gone right for Surrey Police? What do you think has gone wrong? How you think we can improve? That's all those three things are critical that we get your feedback on. I think Surrey Police can be very proud of what they've achieved over the last couple of years. We all recognise there is more to do, of course, but nevertheless, I think we've done a pretty good job. Against a background, I'm afraid, of some very severe cuts, reductions over the last decade. But thankfully, in the last year, things have improved. There have been more officers and staff serving Surrey's communities, well over 100 in post and more to come. There's always a time delay between agreeing to have more people and then recruiting and training them. But I'm very pleased to say that we're on target for getting more people into our ranks. And crucially, more people out in our streets and our communities. As you'll see, there's improved satisfaction of Surrey residents. We're the seventh in the league table nationally. Of course, we want to do even more. And I'm very pleased indeed that victim satisfaction remains high. Those victims are the most vulnerable people in our county. They have a dreadful time generally. And I'm very pleased that the service we give them, crucial service, seems to have gone down well. We did this roadshow a year ago. In person. I'm sorry we can't actually meet you face to face these days. And this is what the increased precept last year gave us. We promised that we would have additional officers and staff by the end of this year, and we're on target to achieve that. They're not all out there, experienced officers on the streets yet. It takes a bit of time to recruit and train them, but I promise you that will happen, and particularly more officers at the local level, and I'm sure James Wyatt will talk more on this aspect in Guildford. And I'm also very pleased we've created a problem-solving unit which helping to improve the clear-up rate. Clear-up rate's okay in comparison with other forces, but we want to do, of course, much, much better, and I think we're on our way to doing that. And in addition to having extra officers, we've managed to give much greater support to the people who really need it. I want to take this opportunity of thanking Surrey residents for the way they have behaved during this pandemic. It's been a very trying time over the last year. Of course it has. But I think in this county we can be proud of the way that we've supported our national health services and our emergency services. Surrey Police have been out there, and they'll stay out there, encouraging and supporting people to adhere to the regulations. If there is a small minority of people who still don't get it, I would urge them yet again. This is literally a matter of life and death. You must obey the rules. Hopefully we're in the last lap here. Surrey Police will not hesitate to enforce those rules if they really have to. This is the ask of myself and Surrey Police on the council tax. The government have allowed us to increase the policing element of the council tax by 5.5%. That's £15 a year on a Band D property. And for that, we're going to be able to recruit extra police officers and staff. That's in addition to the national uplift, Boris's 20,000, which will come into play as well. So there'll be more police officers and staff on our streets. Our consultation is underway at the moment, and we want to hear from you whether you think paying a little bit more in your police precept is worthwhile to get more officers and staff on our streets, to help prevent crime and to increase the solving rate. I'm now going to hand over to the Chief Constable of Surrey Police, Gavin Stevens.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to all of you for joining us online this evening. I really do appreciate you taking the time out and for you showing an interest in the policing of the county. And what a year it's been. But even in these times of uncertainty, I think it's really important for us to plan ahead. And if you came along to one of these events last year in person, then you told us loud and clear what you expected from Surrey Police and where you wanted us to concentrate. Following on from that, I did a big staff engagement exercise in the early part of the year to seek the views of the teams too. And we did then begin to put together our plans for the next 5 years. And of course, as we entered March, the major incident was declared and we were full concentration on policing of the pandemic. So no surprise that the planning went on hold for a little while until we had some respite over the summer, where we were able to dust off the work that we'd done, share that with our partner organisations across the counties to get their views, and then in September we launched our commitments for the next 5 years through to 2025. These were a set of commitments to you in our communities, to each other in the force, and also to the future of the organisation for the things that we wanted to achieve between now and 2025. And I want to go on and talk about those in a little bit more detail. And I also commit to keeping you updated against progress on these. In fact, we had our first quarterly review just before Christmas and published an update early in January. So if you've not seen that, then please do look back at our social media feeds where you can see the progress that we've made in the first quarter. But first of all, I must pay tribute to all of the help and support that we've had from Surrey communities, from other organisations, from volunteers to help us police the pandemic. Much of the media focus on policing through the pandemic has been about enforcement and the issuing of fixed penalty notices, but the policing effort has been much, much wider than that. We have an integral part in supporting the major incident. When that was set up, it was run from our headquarters at Surrey Police, from our training school, where all organisations with military logistics support come together to coordinate all of the activities that are needed to keep us safe and respond to the health emergency. Our police community support officers have visited thousands of vulnerable residents across the county. Our police cadets delivered food parcels to those in need. Our volunteers came out and gave thousands of hours. Officers came out of retirement to lead difficult work on logistics and supply of personal protective equipment, and sadly giving support to the families, the many hundreds of families that have been sadly bereaved due to the coronavirus pandemic. So I pay tribute to everything that colleagues and volunteers have done to help us police the pandemic, and give thanks to all of your support too. We did an independent survey during the first wave of the lockdown, and just under 92% of residents said they had confidence in their local neighbourhood team, and I'm really, really grateful for that support. So moving on to a bit more detail about the commitments, and first of all, the most important set, the commitments that we've made to you in our communities. If you heard me speak last year, you will know that I wanted the organisation to become much more preventative in its outlook. And I'm pleased to say that Surrey is the 6th safest county in England and Wales, and the safest county in the South East. Now that's no small achievement because we have a big border with the capital city, we have Europe's busiest motorway network and proximity to 2 major international airports. So I'm really grateful for all of the hard work that the teams have done to prevent crime, and of course what you've done in your communities too. Turning to the work that we do to protect our communities, this comes in many forms. Sometimes things that we don't pay too much attention to but are really important and destructive to the victims. One such example is Operation Signature, where Surrey Police has led the way in tackling romance fraud. Just last year there were 27 victims of romance fraud, with total financial losses of over £280,000. So a really impactful crime, and I'm pleased with the work that Surrey's led, which has been picked up by the City of London Police and adopted nationally. On the work that we do to pursue offenders, just a few examples again. Operation Centurion is our work to tackle County Line's drug suppliers, where we do joint operations with the Metropolitan Police and other forces around the country, where we tackle at source and on the streets of Surrey those in the drug supply network, doing detailed investigation on communications so we can really reduce the harm that drugs cause on the streets of Surrey. To keep you and your loved ones safe on the roads, we've had Operation Tramline, which gives us a HGV eye view of dangerous driving on the roads, dealing with offences from over 305 motorists to keep the roads of Surrey safe. And more recently, working with British Transport Police, we've had Operation Rally, dealing with those offenders that steal and damage property around the county, defacing the beautiful nature of the place that we live, whether that's through scrap metal theft or theft from our treasured buildings or dumping material on the roads. In that investigation, we stopped over 151 suspicious vehicles and dealt with 31 offences, including offences for licensing and immigration. Of course, there's always more than we can do, and the focus for this year is to solve more crime. If you're a victim of crime in Surrey, then your chances of having that crime cleared up are not high enough, and we want to do better for you on that. Turning next to the commitments that we've made to each other within the organisation. I strongly believe that what an organisation feels to work like has a direct bearing on the quality of service that we give to our communities. So we aspire to the highest levels of professionalism, and we're not afraid to tackle difficult issues. This year we've supported the Everyday Sexism project with an online debate looking at the discrimination that female colleagues can experience in the workplace in their everyday interactions. And we streamed that debate online for people to engage with. Of course, we also want to be an inclusive organisation, one that's welcoming to all and representative of the communities that we've served. And this year we welcomed over 268 new officers to Surrey Police. And in October, we had our biggest attestation that we've ever done, swearing in 75 new officers all on the same day. And if that wasn't enough, we welcomed 33 transferees, some of which were returning to Surrey, having tried policing elsewhere, 56 police community support officers and 301 police staff. So it's been a really busy year for our recruitment and training teams. And we're incredibly proud of what we do in Surrey. We celebrated Black History Month, welcoming back to Surrey Dr. Victor Elisa, Surrey's first black police officer. And the online debate that he took part in was attended by police services from around the country. And the exhibition that we put together went out into communities so you could engage in that too. So our focus for this year will be to maintain those exceptional high standards of selection, recruitment, training and continuous professional development so that we can give you the highest possible quality service that we can. And then finally, turning to the commitments that we've made about the future of the force over the next 5 years. You know that I wanted to be a more preventative organisation, and our new problem-solving team are overseeing over 350 live problem-solving cases. They are cases where local officers are trying to get to the root causes of crime issues to design out crime in the first place. We've done much more in partnership this year, not just because of the pandemic, but because policing cannot be done alone. We can't keep this county safe on our own. Our special constables, for example, have given 43,000 hours of voluntary service, some of which have been furloughed from their organisations during the pandemic and have chosen to give their time to policing. The partnerships that we've developed this year have been very strong, and I want to make sure that they endure, so working together we can give you the best possible service. And finally, I think it's one of my responsibilities as Chief Constable to get the full potential out of the organisation. So that's from the people that we welcome and the service that they give, but also the technology that we deploy. And this year we've introduced a new body-worn video system, a brand new system to manage all of our digital evidence, which allows you to directly upload online material that you may have to help our investigations. We've adopted a digital 101 service, which provides 24/7, 365 days a year, a way for you to contact us online and get the same high quality service that you do when you contact us on the telephone. Of course, there's always more we can do, and the focus for this year is for us to use all of that information that we have to really understand the demand for policing services, to make sure that the new money and new colleagues that we're welcoming really go to the areas where they're most needed. And on that point, I'd like to turn to the Borough Commander for Guildford, Inspector James Wyatt, which will give you a perspective on the local policing in his area.
Thank you, sir. My name's James Wyatt and I'm the Borough Commander for Guildford. I've been in post since October 2020, and before that I worked as a duty inspector leading our response and investigation teams across West Surrey, including Guildford. I'd like to take the opportunity today to discuss what we've been doing for the past year and looking forward to the coming year and what we're going to be focusing on. Firstly, I'd like to have a look at our policing structure in Guildford and give you an understanding of the excellent teamwork that goes into keeping Guildford the safest borough it can be. I lead the specialist neighbourhood team with 3 sergeants, 9 PCs and 16 PCSOs. And among those PCs, we have neighbourhood specialist officers who work to deal with long-term problem solving within the community, and also youth engagement officers who work with partners in education and health and Guildford Borough Council to intervene in criminality and educate the young people within Guildford Borough. We then have the neighbourhood policing team, who I used to be one of the leaders within, who respond to crimes and calls within Guildford Borough and investigate volume crime. We are also supported by force-wide resources such as road policing, dog section and our firearms teams. We then have a number of investigative teams such as CID, our safeguarding units, intelligence, proactive and child exploitation teams. And they work to not only investigate crimes within the borough, but also work with us to problem solve and prevent crimes occurring in the first place, dealing with locations, people, and themes within the borough. We then also have some core functions such as our criminal justice partners, our contact centre, who you'll speak with if you contact Surrey Police, our custody suites, professional standards departments, and importantly, our external partners. That can consist of our partners within the council, education sectors, health, charities and faith groups. And we recognise the teamwork from all sides of external partners that go to problem solving. So looking at our priorities, you'll see that problem solving is a thread that runs through them all. We're a problem solving force and we have a dedicated problem solving team with expert advisors and analysts who will look at trends, identify patterns, look nationally and internationally for best practice, and then apply those to the problems that we see in Guildford. So looking firstly at burglary. Burglary is an incredibly impactful crime type. To be a victim of burglary can be really impactful on your feeling of safety, and it's one that won't be tolerated in Guildford. An example of what we're doing in Guildford is an operation in Send this year, where we're looking at the crime types and the trends and putting in extra work with our designing out crime officers to prevent crime happening in the future. Due to the pandemic, crime figures are naturally different this year, and we're looking to take an opportunity in the reduction in burglaries to increase crime prevention and make sure we stay at this level. Moving on to domestic abuse, it's an incredibly impactful crime towards both victims and their families, one that has been a priority and will remain a priority in Guildford. We work with our Safeguarding Investigation Unit to investigate all crimes of domestic abuse thoroughly and ideally seek a criminal justice outcome. But most importantly, it's about preventing reoccurrence and re-victimisation. And when a criminal justice outcome isn't possible, we look at things such as domestic violence protection orders and notices to enforce some separation and allow our charity partners and partners within with health settings and education settings to get involved with the victim and their family and try and prevent reoffending. And that's something we'll focus on in the coming year. We then have antisocial behaviour, which absolutely will not be tolerated in Guildford. We have a specialist antisocial behaviour officer working within my team. And we work to firstly intervene and support those involved in antisocial behaviour to deter them from such activity. But we then go on to seek out orders and closures of properties to ensure that the quality of life of the people of Guildford is maintained to a high standard. And then we look at hate crime. Again, hate crime is unacceptable crime, very impactful upon the victim, and it's one that I'm personally responsible for in Guildford. I review all hate crimes that come into Guildford, and I work with the problem-solving team to deal with hotspot locations and individuals. Now time to look at some of the trends within Guildford. Burglary has seen a significant reduction this year, and we're looking to take that opportunity to make sure our crime prevention advice is there for everybody to ensure that we take this theme into the coming year. Overall crime has reduced, and with it, violence and robbery has gone down across the borough. We've seen an increase in some crime types, domestic abuse being one of them. We know that this is a hidden crime happening behind closed doors, and one that we would encourage everybody to report if they're a victim of or they know somebody who is a victim of. An increase in this crime type, while worrying for increased victims, means that we know about these crimes happening and we can work with our partners to support those victims. The same is for hate crime. Again, an underreported crime type and one that we would encourage people to report. Knowing about these crimes helps us to work with partners to deal with those offenders, support the victims, and deal with those hotspot locations. Drugs continues to be a theme in Guildford, and due to being close to the metropolitan area of London, we have county lines operating within the borough. We work with our proactive colleagues and our partners to deal with those county lines, and by a drug offence being accorded, it means we have found drugs, so an increase in this crime type reflects our hard work in this area. And antisocial behaviour, we've again seen a slight increase in that, again an underreported crime type, so I would encourage everybody to report any antisocial behaviour they witness or are a victim of. That helps us to build an overall picture of what's going on in the borough and helps us to inform how we use our resources to deal with that. To talk further on antisocial behaviour in Guildford, using our antisocial behaviour officer, we've managed to close down 9 properties within the borough this year. As we move forward, we've got a number of more in the pipeline, and we do these as a last resort to protect the quality of life of the residents of Guildford. These closures come with a number of support mechanisms for those involved as well to try and prevent this happening again in the future. We've taken out 2 criminal behaviour orders on individuals and have another 5 in progress to tackle the repeat antisocial behaviour of individuals within the borough of Guildford. And we've placed 16 community protection warnings and notices, again used to try and control repeat antisocial behaviour. And all of these has been a result of the information received from yourselves. So please continue to tell us whenever you are experiencing or witnessing antisocial behaviour. So looking forward, we've got a number of priorities for the year looking forward, which is the first will be partnership working. As I've discussed already, we work with a number of partners across many sectors, including charities and faith groups, and we work better together. We will continue this focus into the coming year. Crime prevention, using our designing out crime officers and using our problem-solving team will remain a theme, and any crime type that takes place in Guildford will come from a crime prevention standpoint. We will continue to protect the vulnerable, whether that be our young people, those suffering with mental health issues, or victims of crime. As I discussed, we have county lines operating within Guildford. In the last year, we've disrupted 5 county lines, arresting over 30 individuals for drug dealing offences. We'll continue that work with our partners in Metropolitan Police and our intelligence departments and problem-solving teams. We'll continue to tackle ASB robustly, and I ask for your assistance in doing that, reporting incidents of ASB to us so that we can monitor trends and deal with those who are committing ASB in the community. And we'll look at ways to strengthen our community engagement through events such as this, through platforms such as Facebook, but also through community media outlets. So I'd like to thank you very much for your support in the last year and the coming year, and encourage you to report any antisocial behaviour or crime to us through our telephone network, online, through our website, through Crime Stoppers anonymously, and I'd encourage you to follow us on Facebook to keep up to date with what we're up to in Guildford. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James. We'll now move on to the important part of this event, which is to hear your questions and comments.
Hello, everybody, and good evening. Welcome to tuning in. What you've just heard is 3 presentations which we recorded a few days ago, but we've got more or less the same team. I'm David Munro, Surrey's Police and Crime Commissioner, Gavin Stevens, Chief Constable of Surrey, and Inspector James Wyatt, who is the Borough Commander Guildford. We're with you live, and we're also joined online by Sergeant Ian Manners, who will be trying to answer a few of the very local questions simultaneously with us. So you get the verbals from us, and you'll get some typing from Ian Manners. So we've extended the question time following feedback because, frankly, more people were wanting to have questions answered than we were expecting, which is a good thing. So we've got a 45-minute session now. Now, question 1. We would very much welcome more frequent police patrols in our road following 5 major break-ins. What's the current official police policy? Chief, presumably that's for you to start with on the Surrey Police, and then James, you'll give her your local perspective, of course.
Yeah, well, when we do get reports of patterns of break-ins, one of the things that we do encourage is house to house as part of that investigation, and cocooning activity for neighbours to look after each other. So it's an active part of what we do across the county, and I'm sure James can give a local perspective on problems in the borough.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So burglary is a priority for the force and the borough. We've got a number of mechanisms which we use to monitor burglary trends and also respond to those. So first and foremost, the local officers who police the area day in, day out will monitor crime trends in their area in specific roads, and they will adjust their patrols to those so that a visible presence will be seen, offering reassurance but also crime prevention. And then we also have a number of meetings in the background. So I attend a weekly burglary meeting where we look at burglary trends, current investigations, monitoring suspects in the area, and all that goes towards kind of looking at longer term trends, whether that be in a particular road or a particular town. And then we can go into some of our problem solving techniques involving our designing out crime officers to try and make that area less attractive to burgle and try and catch those who are committing those offences.
Thank you very much indeed. And burglary, of course, is a force priority, a local priority. It's certainly one of my priorities as well. It's particularly vicious, nasty crime. Question 2, related question. One for you, James. What are the local police doing about cars being broken into and or blue badges, disabled badges being taken, specifically in the GU29 area? I'm not sure exactly where that is, but I'm sure you know.
Yes, so thank you. So every crime that gets reported to us is investigated based on its lines of inquiries. And so that every crime will go through that process. So this specific issue is not one that's been raised to me, but I'm very keen to hear more about it. So I'd encourage whoever asked this question to please email us at the end of the slides or end of our presentation. You'll have an email address there. So if you could please get in touch with us and I'll look into that more.
Thank you very much indeed on that. And question 3, Warwick Road, Ashvale, just had 2 break-ins there. Questioner says, never seen any police presence in that area. And do we prioritise crimes such as hate crimes over burglaries? And that's first part, and I'll come on to the second part later. Chief, for a policy one, hate crimes over burglaries? It depends, surely.
Yeah, it all depends. Each crime that's reported to us gets an assessment, and of course, something like hate crime and burglary are both going to get a good response from policing. It's not one or the other. That's clearly an issue where we're going to need to deal with both, because they can have significant impact on the victims of them. Both are crimes that can really undermine people's sense of safety and confidence, so we respond to them both very robustly.
Good, and I'd certainly agree with that. You can have really vicious hate crimes and you can have vicious burglaries. Now, can we expect to see officers when the government has reached its recruiting figures, or will they just fill up more desks? No, the answer is the government's Boris's bobbies are all warranted officers, and they'll be out there, and the officers and staff, which are paid for by the police precept, in fact there's rather more of those, will also all be frontline or operational support staff helping the front lines. No back office, no people just sitting at desks, I can assure you. Chief, would you just like to expand? Since you're their employing officer.
Yeah, and we're still in these current plans. We're making multi-million pounds of efficiency savings. So even with the new investments, we're still taking savings out. I just sort of challenge the premise of the question in a way as well, because sometimes officers do need to sit and do computer work when you're investigating things such as online child sex abuse or particular difficult fraud or computer offences. That's desk-based research. You can't do that sort of investigation out walking the high streets of villages. So there is technical police work now that does happen behind the desk, but that's all stuff that needs to be done to keep us safe.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Now, a question on COVID fines. How many have been fixed penalty notices have been issued in Surrey, and how does that compare with other forces? And perhaps, James, after that, after the Chief, you could say what's happening in Surrey, in Guildford on that.
Yep. So the latest published numbers for Surrey, which were to the 17th of January, 690 tickets for Surrey. There is quite a spread nationally. That puts us on a par with a county like Essex, for example, so similar sized place. You do have some areas where the numbers are much higher, so places like Devon and Cornwall and Cumbria, where they've had lots of problems with many people travelling excessive distances, congregating in areas of natural beauty and national parks and so on. But I'm really pleased to say that the vast majority of the well over 1 million residents that we have in Surrey have done exactly the right thing to keep each other safe. And we've had, as I say, 690 tickets and just a couple of £10,000 offences too. So really pleased that by and large we're following the rules.
Thank you very much. And James, what about Guildford then?
Yeah, so just to echo, really, overwhelmingly, we've seen a great response to the guidelines. In Guildford, we have had 135 fixed penalty notices since April of 2020. So across that period and those lockdowns.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, question 5. Two very unfortunate. There's a planned burglary against a vulnerable resident and also an attempted entrance. Hampshire's Bobby scheme, a Blue Lamp Trust, they supply and fit an approved key safe for the elderly and vulnerable. Sounds good. Does Surrey have a similar scheme? Chief, I think it's one for you, I think.
Yeah, there are a number of schemes like that across Surrey. I can't say whether James has got one in his local patch, but I'll hand over to James. But I do know that some borough and districts do that. Of course, all areas have got access to a crime reduction advisor or designing out crime officer. They can provide free advice to any resident that needs it and make recommendations. But James.
Yes, yeah. So our Designing Out Crime officer here is available to recommend all types of security devices, including key safes. So if there is any questions or any concerns around protecting the vulnerable or for somebody or someone you know, then please just let us know through some of the reporting mechanisms, and it'll be referred through to our Designing Out Crime officer.
That's great. So it's not called the same as Hampshire's scheme, but there is an equivalent scheme in Surrey, which is good to know. Thank you very much. Now, question 6. What are the force's actions and plans with dealing with the latest COVID breaches where guests are visiting people's homes? In lockdown 3, what's the policy there?
Yeah, well, we've had a consistent sort of national policy throughout. That when we come across breaches, we'll sort of engage with people, explain them to the rules if there's any confusion, encourage them to do the right thing, which most people do, but if necessary, enforce. In terms of in private homes, we don't have a power of entry, but that's not to say that we haven't dealt with big gatherings. We had one summons for a £10,000 fine for exactly that, which was a big party at somebody's house. So the important thing is to keep reporting these breaches to us. Of course, we have dedicated resources and some extra funding available to help tackle this. So if it's something really serious, then we can send somebody there as part of those patrols. Otherwise, we look for the patterns and trends to inform our patrol plans. But James, anything that you want to say from the Guildford patch?
Yeah, so we work really closely with the Guildford Borough Council, who have marshals out there as well, trying to encourage people to follow those guidelines and educate. Just in Guildford alone, over the last year, we've attended a minimum of 450 reports from the public of breaches of exactly this type to educate and enforce if we need to. So that information coming from you is vital to that.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, the next question. I'm proposing that the extra police precept pays for 10 officers and 67 staff, and that complements, of course, the government's offer of 73 police officers. There's a question, how does that work? Why only 10 warranted police officers but 67 staff? And the answer, and I'll hand over to the Chief in a moment, is those staff. When you say staff, that sort of gives an impression that they're people just sitting at their desks, back office. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are operational staff, police community support officers, people working on solving crimes as investigators, analysts, people who will be bumping up our contact staff, so it become much more easier to contact the force and so on. Every single one of those will be working closely with police officers to make our county safer. Chief, over to you.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, and the sort of distinction between officers and staff in modern police service today really is a false one, because you know, most of our, so the staff that made this evening possible, for example, that get us online and answer your queries when you come through to us on our sort of digital contact. Staff that do intelligence development out in the field, often covertly, crime scene examiners, police community support officers, custody officers. These are all staff, but they're very much operational roles. So really important that we have those as part of the team. What I can give assurance on is that none of this investment is in sort of back or middle office functions. It's all things that help keep the county safe.
Thank you very much. And James, while we're on this, you've already had some officers have joined your ranks from last year's precept, I know. Would you just like to outline what extra forces you've got?
Yeah, of course. So we've had 2 additional neighbourhood specialist officers, so police officers out on the beat, solving problems and dealing with long-term issues within the community, and also an additional youth engagement officer working with young people of the borough to educate and also divert from crime if they're on that path. So we've already seen that coming through, and it's made a really big difference to our team's capability.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Now, how can we achieve better local reporting? I currently have to get all information on local crimes from the Surrey Police website, and that's very general. Well, we have got other channels, and James, are you the best person to talk about that? How does your team get in touch with Guildford residents?
Of course, yeah. So we've got, for people who use social media, we've got our Facebook account where we will update with our activities, any recent witness appeals for crimes that may have happened, and also crime prevention advice. So that's a really good tool for people who use social media. We also use sites such as In the Know, which we'll use to put out information, crime figures and general crime trends to just help inform people about what's going on in the area. So that's supported by our Neighbourhood Watch colleagues. So I'd encourage you to sign up to that. And then we also speak with a number of local news outlets to try and engage with the public in that way as well. But we're always open to new engagement strategies. So again, the email at the end of this presentation, you can get in touch with us there.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, here's a question for me. How do you expect people to pay extra when their pensions are static and are not increasing at the same rate as your expenditure? One of my jobs, and I can't duck it, as Police and Crime Commissioner, is to set the police precept every year, or recommend it to my Police and Crime panel. And I'm going to be making a formal recommendation on Friday, and that's why we're having all these community engagement meetings that critically depend on what you think. It's been far more difficult this year to come to a decision than ever before. Everybody wants good policing. I think they're getting it. But this year, so many people have told me that they are really strapped for cash. Far too many people are on furlough, people's income disappearing, and people who are on fixed pensions, of course, don't have the extra to pay extra council tax. I get all that, and which is why it is so difficult to get the balance. The government have allowed us to put up the precept by £15 a year for a standard Band D property. That's £1.25 a month. My provisional recommendation to the Police and Crime panel on Friday is to accept that. But I haven't yet analysed all the consultation responses, so it's a provisional recommendation, and that's got to so wait till Friday. So important that people tell me what they think, and so important that people will reply to my consultation document. I do appreciate the problems, but I have to come to a firm recommendation, and that's soon. So let's see how we go at this stage. Chief, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Well, only that the proposal that we put before you, Commissioner, are based very much on a detailed analysis of the need that we have of local residents and businesses across the county. We look at the areas where we feel we need to give an improved service based on the feedback we get on evenings such as this. All of that informs the proposals that we put forward to keep the county safe.
Thank you. And there's a question linked, which has just come in, which is a political one, so it's one for me. The government, the questioner says, has run down the police service over the last decade. Now they have finally realised that this was wrong. They want us to dig in our pockets to rectify the situation. Can anyone explain to me how this is just and fair? Well, I certainly can't explain to you that it's just and fair, because I think it's unjust and unfair. Here are the facts. In real terms, Surrey Police, including the proposed precept increase and the government's money, will be back to the funding that it had 10 years ago, allowing for inflation. So it's not better, it's not worse. It was, of course, a lot worse 4 or 5 years ago. And so in the meantime, as the Chief Constable has explained, I think demand has increased enormously as well. The real difference is not in the absolute amount, is, as the questioner says, it's coming from a different place. Government support, general taxation support, has decreased by 50% in the last 10 years. That's a staggering decrease. And the slack has had to be taken up by Surrey council taxpayer, and that's going up year after year. So that is the factual answer to the questioner's question. My personal opinion, but I'm not going to ask police officers for their opinion, was it's political. That is not just, it's not fair, and we will be making strong reservations, and the whole funding formula is going to be looked at. We've been promised for next year, so that we can get an equitable funding situation. Thank you very much for that question. I'll just go back a bit now. Excuse me. Right, question 9 then. Councillor Paul Deach, Surrey Heath, a good friend of mine, has secured some funding for CCTV surveillance for vulnerable residents. Is there anything like this for Ash Vale residents? And there's a very sad case history in that question. James, can you give a detailed answer to that?
Yeah, of course. So there's two main options when it comes to supporting vulnerable victims such as this. So as we've discussed already, one of them is the use of our designing out crime officers, who can, following a traumatic incident such as this, go to somebody's house and carry out an assessment of their security needs. And part of that would be potentially CCTV to be fitted. And depending on their situation, that there's also funding available for that. If the issue was larger than that, for a kind of a more widespread community issue, then there are also CCTV cameras available through what we call the JAG, which is the Joint Action Group, which is chaired by Guildford Borough Council. The councillors do attend that, as well as ourselves and other representatives from Guildford Borough Council, and issues such as this can be taken to that group and funding be applied for CCTV, such as in this case.
Great, thank you very much. And I myself have got a fund, the Community Safety Fund, which is available in principle to help that. There's a proper process to go through. It's public money, but do get in touch, get onto my website, or write to me personally and get on and start the process. And look forward to hearing from you and others. So a further question linked to the precept and civilian staff. You seem to be incredibly top heavy with civilian staff. Why is this? I think I take issue with the premise. I don't think we are incredibly top heavy with civilian staff. We do have some, of course. I'd just like to say, before I hand over to the Chief, we look at the wage bill, the staff bill, very closely indeed. There have been tens of millions of pounds in savings over the last 10 years, to my certain knowledge, and staff are always scrutinised. As the Chief Constable has explained, the staff and officers work as one team, and they are just as important in their own ways. And I may say we have a very stiff vacancy policy. If a police officer leaves the force, he or she is replaced as soon as possible. So there is a no vacancy policy. When staff members leave, there is a policy that we more often than not leave that vacancy unfilled deliberately, purely to save money. And that's working, I think, quite well, but we keep a careful eye on that as well. That's all from me on that, but Chief, would you like to put your view across?
Just to refer back to what I was saying earlier, that it's really important to know that a lot of police staff are doing frontline operational roles, or indeed important operational roles, to keep the criminal justice process going. So, for example, if we're going to have more officers from the 20,000 national uplift, they generate more work for the criminal justice service, more speeding tickets and fines, for example. All of that needs to be dealt with. And we need colleagues to help us out with that, to get that information before court, for example, or deal with the people that we bring into custody. So, we look carefully at that balance, and from my perspective, it's definitely not out of kilter.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. Now, have police officers and other frontline staff been offered the COVID vaccine yet? Answer, no. If not, why not? Chief, I know you have a policy on that.
Yeah, so of course the first people that need to be vaccinated, and nobody would argue with this, those that are at most risk of death or serious illness from COVID. And the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation has clearly set out those priorities. And in policing, we wouldn't want to get ahead of those in any way. But we do think there is a strong case for frontline colleagues and critical roles in particular, in things like firearms and custody, to have access to the vaccination so we can stay safe in order to keep people safe on the street. We've made that case privately and publicly very strongly. It is supported by the Home Office, and I know that the National Joint Committee are taking that very seriously, as they are with other professions such as teaching, for example, and social work. So there are lots of occupational groups that want access to the vaccine. We haven't got it yet. I'm sure it will come. In the interim, we do have a scheme where emergency service workers, other public service workers can have access to vaccine stock that would otherwise be disposed of at the end of the day because of the extreme cold temperatures that need to be kept at. It has a short shelf life. So we make sure across the county that nothing is wasted. And those that are providing 24/7 emergency services often get people there at the end of those sessions to make sure that any vaccine that would go to waste goes into somebody's arm instead. And a number of colleagues have had vaccinations that way.
That's great. And I've personally been lobbying the policing minister to make sure that the Ministry of Health knows exactly how important it is that police officers and operational staff get vaccinated as soon as possible, while maintaining basic fairness, of course. Now, with increased funding for community policing over the past couple of years, what has Surrey Police been doing to strengthen links with Surrey local communities? I think, Jade, why don't you start off by saying what you've been doing personally and with your team to do that?
Yeah, of course. So with more resources, we're able to get out into the community more, engage with the community, and kind of help that flow of information back and forth, which is invaluable. Just a patrol down a particular street, and we'll come away from that with lots of information and intelligence that we wouldn't have otherwise had. With COVID, that's understandably hindered some of that interaction, but my focus locally will be officers out in the community and engaging with the community in that way. We do have a number of engagement strategies that go on behind that, such as with faith groups, with other areas such as the business groups within the town centre, and also our university population here in Guildford. So there's a number of strategies going on and planned for the future.
Good, and that will continue. And I know that you've had extra officers and staff such as PCSOs coming into the ranks to do just that. Chief, a force-wide perspective?
Yeah, well, it's very much part of our policing model. I mean, we're wholly reliant on good information and intelligence from communities to be successful at tackling the problems that matter in their area. So central to our problem solving effort, central to what we want to do through youth engagement and so on, and also through our sort of online and social work. So really, really important for us. And if people have got new ideas, as James has been saying, always keen to hear them.
Thank you. And for my part, in my tour so far, I've met thousands and thousands of residents, resident association, neighbourhood watch, community speed watch, just ordinary residents who've contacted me. Haven't been able to do that as much in the last year for obvious reasons. Really keen that I get back to that. But contact with our communities is, of course, just fundamental to everything else we do. Now, it's an interesting question. I live in Guildford Borough, but when I rang 999, I was pasted through to Hampshire Police. Why is this, please? Anybody think?
Yeah,
do you live very close to the border, I wonder?
Yes, so we do have cases of specifically bordering with Vale, Ash, because of the proximity to Hampshire. Sometimes the calls will be misrouted through to Hampshire, and they'll simply send those back over to us. So there's a system in place to deal with that.
And of course, that also applies to 101, as I know from personal experience. Yes, it's a very slick system. Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, I missed out one question. I'll go back to it. What power do you have to ensure people stay at home to reduce the spread of the South African corona variant? What's your plan for tomorrow? And specifically with the postal code GU21, where two cases of the South African variant were discovered very recently.
Yep.
Chief, this is yours.
Well, I can help put this into perspective. I, with colleagues, have been working around the clock on this over the weekend. So the first thing to say is not the whole of GU21. I know some of the national media has been trailing it as the whole of GU21, which is a huge area. It's the area around GU21 8UB, so a specific area of St John's, Golders Park. There is a very clear map. If you want to see that map, it's on the Woking Borough Council website, and it'll show you exactly which houses are included. As the Commissioner was saying, this comes from identifying just a couple of cases in that area of the South African variant, and our health colleagues at a national, regional, local level would like to do an assessment to see whether or not there's been any transmission in the local community. So we're doing a surge testing exercise where if you live or have a business in that area, you will be offered a voluntary opportunity to do a home testing kit. Those home testing kits will then get a special service to make sure they look for that particular variant, which will help inform sort of health policy from that point onwards. So from tomorrow, there will be volunteers in that local area going door to door to hand out those home testing kits and to arrange collection if necessary, and explaining what needs to be done. We'll have a small policing presence there just to reassure people and make sure that people are confident about what's happening in that local area. So it's a health surveillance exercise. There's no additional powers to make people stay at home, so people should just follow the normal guidelines that we all have to do, which is stay home unless you've got a reason, excuse to be leaving. So that's the situation in that particular area of Woking, not the whole of GU21, I hasten to add.
Thank you very much. A very up-to-date question. Now, you refer to initiatives to improve the safety of our roads. We certainly do. Speed limits are rarely observed. There's been a substantial increase in motorists jumping red lights and not stopping at junctions. And very unfortunately, there was a death at Ashvale Station. What are the force doing to improve the safety of our roads? I think that's one for you again, Chief. Then I'll come to you, James, to talk about Guildford Borough.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with the risks that the questioner outlines there. Death and serious injury on Surrey's roads is going down, I'm pleased to report, but nevertheless, every serious injury and death is clearly one that we want to seek to try and prevent. So one of the areas that we're looking to invest more in next year, should the plans go through, is in the team within our roads policing that do address the fatal five, so drink and drugs and speeding, for example, to have more resource doing that. At a local level, James has got access to a casualty reduction officer. I'm sure he'll talk about that in a moment. And increasingly on these issues, we do receive footage from members of the public from their cycle helmet cams and their dash cams and bus cameras and so on. And we have an online platform now where people can upload that evidence to, if it's going to form part of an investigation. So lots happening, and hand over to James to give a local perspective on it.
Thank you, sir. So there's two arms to this, really. So we have a local speed management plan, which is formed based on the collision data that we have, informed by offences that we know are taking place, and also from public opinion. So with that speed management plan, we have a casualty reduction officer who will go to those particular roads that have been identified as the ones that are causing the most harm, and they will use their time at those locations to make best use of that time. So to put it into context, in the last year, our casualty reduction officer has identified over 1,700 offences which have been dealt with through their work alone. Then you also have a scheme which is called the Community Speed Watch, where members of the community become trained in how to operate a laser device to record speed in a particular problem road in their area. And then by working with the casualty reduction officer, they are able to feed that information back, and then we can send letters to those individuals. And if we have persistent repeat offenders, then escalate it with visits from the casualty reduction officer, and then more proactive work from then on. And and again, to put their hard work, and I must stress their volunteered work, into kind of context, they recorded over 2,100 registration plates in just 1 year, which were then passed on to us of speeding motorists. So it's a really valuable piece of work that they do. And if there's a particular problem in one of your communities, then please let us know if you're interested in setting up one of these community speed watch, and we can work on that with you.
And I'd certainly echo that. Community speed watch is a really important part of delivering on the safety of our roads and our communities generally. I thoroughly support it. And Chief, we were talking just very recently about how we could bump it up to make quite sure that our volunteers out there in all weathers get the proper support and training that they need. And that's going to happen. Now, of the 268 new officers, I'll take your word for it, that's the number. What proportion are from Black and Asian ethnic minorities? I don't think we can give you the definite answer. I don't want to give an approximate answer. So we'll have to come back to you on that. But what I will say is that we are very, very keen indeed to widen the pool that we recruit police officers and staff as well. So people from the BME community, men and women, people with all protected characteristics are really, really welcome in Surrey Police, and that the proportion from those communities has gone up in recent years. Good. It needs to go up even further, and we have a positive action programme to make quite sure that happens. But I will say we want everybody from any community at all. Please think about Surrey Police. Please give it a go. You won't regret it. Chief, I know you're absolutely at one on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will come back with an accurate figure. What I can say is it's not high enough. So I know it's not as high as our census information, for example, because we do monitor it, but I can't give you an exact figure out the 268. I ought to point out as well that 268 was the figure to the end of November. We've had intakes again since in January as well, with an additional 54 colleagues joining us. We tend to do quite well with colleagues from our Asian communities joining us, not so much from Black Afro-Caribbean communities. So really encouraging. During the course of this year, even during lockdown, I've done a number of online evening sessions with diverse communities across Surrey to try and encourage them to look at policing as a career and describe what an exciting and varied career it can be. So if anyone is interested or knows of someone that's interested, please do pass the word on. Now is a great time to be joining policing.
Thank you very much. Now, a tongue-in-cheek question. Gosh, you can say that again, reading it. Claire, you spend a lot of time on analysts to look at crime nationally, and the implication is those analysts more usefully employed actually out on the beat. I don't think the team will agree with that. I don't. Crime prevention is a matter of intelligence, isn't it, Chief? Yeah, it is, very, very much so. Lots of international evidence to show that sort of random beat work doesn't reduce crime. What does reduce crime is targeted hotspot patrol in areas that are identified through intelligence. That's community intelligence and all of the information that we hold and our partners hold on where things are happening, and development with field work. So some of our intelligence officers are out doing observation posts and so on, covertly watching for things. So it's more than just feet on the street. There are some crime tags clearly which can be reduced by feet on the street, but others that need detailed technical work. So just a little insight. A particular problem burglary series that's under proactive investigation at the moment, where the lead came from digital forensics. So that's forensics on communication information from mobile phone devices. That needs technical specialists and analysts to then allow the officers to get involved then in the surveillance work and so on to get arrests done, not done by patrolling the streets. Thank you. But of course, I know you'd agree that patrolling the street is also important. It's certainly what residents want, and rightly so. And the whole subject of community reassurance, and as we've heard question after question, is very dear to my heart and yours as well. I know that. Right. Question 17. I give my full support to Surrey Police in preventing crime and protecting communities. Thank you for that. I know there are neighbourhood schemes. I think you may be talking about Neighbourhood Watch, and of only perhaps 1 or 2 roads. You'd like to see more schemes in Surrey, so would we, and those schemes involve residents to come forward to create them. That's also true. And now, James, perhaps in Guildford, how's the Neighbourhood Watch scene looking in Guildford? Pretty healthy, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is healthy, but it could always be healthier. They're the eyes and the ears of the public out there, and they provide us with incredibly useful information. So I would personally love for them to be on every street. But as you say, they do need people to come forward and be willing to set those schemes up. So I'd just really echo that and encourage you to become involved.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'll just go back again. Do you have a home beat system where we could chat to a local officer, as we have had no contact at all in Ash, says the questioner. James, I'm sure you can comment on that.
Yeah, of course. So we don't have a system where you can just have a conversation with that officer. However, we do have dedicated local officers for the Ash area. Obviously, they can't be there all the time, but they are there dealing with the problem locations and being directed by crime trends and what we're seeing are becoming problems. Again, with the email address at the end of this presentation is a way to get in touch with us, and it is something I'd like to look at going forwards once we move beyond COVID, about increasing our presence in the communities, perhaps with fixed locations that you can come and speak with us. So it's definitely something that's on my agenda.
And
good.
Just to add to that as well, all of the local social media accounts, including James's Guildford Beat account on Facebook or on Twitter, they are monitored 365 days a year, 24/7. So if you send either a public or a private message to one of those accounts, it will be picked up by the team in our contact centre, and they can pass it on to James's team if it's a local issue too.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much. Now, you've identified that crimes such as robberies and burglaries have decreased and domestic violence has increased. Is this in fact a direct correlation to the impact of COVID and lockdowns, and is the potential for these to increase post-COVID? Probably need to amplify that question. Chief, perhaps you give us the latest stats. I think you covered it earlier, but
yeah. So overall across the county, burglaries are down 1,550 offences in the last reporting period. So a huge reduction, and of course that's because people have been at home by and large. Domestic violence, we've seen increases of around 8%. And again, a consequence of COVID. So yes, we are planning for increases in these offences, including actually in domestic violence, because what we found when the restrictions were lifted last time was that gave an opportunity for people to report that they perhaps hadn't had when they were in lockdown. I would say if anybody is suffering domestic abuse, or you know of somebody that is, you can leave home. So the lockdown restrictions do not apply to you. You can walk out, you can seek help. And we'll be there along with our support agencies to support you through that. So yes, we are planning ahead. Of course, the other thing, when restrictions are eased and licensed premises open back again, we have significant policing operations for the easing of the first lockdown, for the inevitable celebrations that will take place. And of course, we all look forward to those, but I think we've got a little while to go yet before that's the case.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Now, this is not sure this is a policing question, but I'll put it anyway. What's your thought on introducing 3,500 people into the Slyfield Wayside Urban Village? Higher density than Singapore, it's thought. Has this come your way yet, James?
It's not. However, we do our designing out crime officers, our crime prevention officers. They are involved in housing estates such as this, so they'll be consulted from the very beginning at the planning stage to make recommendations around crime prevention, around how to make that living space safe for everybody that lives there and the residents who are already in that area.
Okay, can I, I'll take you to question 21. I'll come back to question 20. It's all about DOCOs, designing out crime officers. Several references to the availability of crime prevention advice. How do residents access this?
Of course, so designing out crime officers, they are, I think we used to call them crime prevention officers. They are experts in carrying out analysis of places and buildings to identify any weaknesses that might be exploited and making those harder to attack. So we use them to, if we've got an investigation into a particular crime, we will use them to help safeguard that individual or that person or that location. If you feel that you could benefit from having one of their assessments, then you just need to get in touch with us. That can be done many ways. So you can call in on 101, you can report it on our website, you can leave us a note on Facebook, and then we'll be able to make an assessment about whether that meets the threshold or not.
Thank you very much. There's only time for 2 more questions now, which is a great shame. But now, question 20. Why do you not have a simplified web page for contact only? The current site wants so much detail, I won't use it. I've got a great deal of sympathy for that point of view, but it's not as simple as it seems. I know that too, unfortunately. Chief, can you elaborate?
I can answer that. You've effectively got a choice of the way that you can contact us online. So if you don't want to do one of those automated forms that, of course, takes you through getting all the right information from you, then you can just chat to us on any of the social media platforms. You can do that publicly or privately. Then it's literally just what you type into the chat and we will pick up. You can do that through a chat function on the website, or as I say, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Any of those services will allow you just to have a chat with one of the operators in the contact centre, and that's really quick and really easy. Okay,
thank you very much. Now, the last question: if you had a bigger budget, where would you prioritise the spending of the funds? I'm going to say my say, and then let's have 2 completely different views from other people. I would like to spend it on 2 different areas. The first of all is cybercrime, which I think is growing exponentially. We simply don't have enough resources on that. And secondly, I would like to put even more officers into our communities, into our street, under the command of people like James, which directly would serve Guildford. But of course, there's all sorts of other areas spend more victim support, for instance. But let's just go for those 2. Chief, what's your view?
We would agree on the latter. Local resourcing, definitely, because prevention is always good, and James's team is very focused on prevention. The second area, which I mentioned in my introduction, is that I really want to do better for local residents in bringing more offenders to justice, particularly in areas like domestic abuse, rape and serious sexual offending. We need to get more justice for victims, so more skilled investigators in those fields.
And I wouldn't disagree with that. Yes, James.
To echo some of those points, so officers to get out there into the community engagement, gather that information that helps inform everything that we do, and then problem solving as well, to make sure that we're not dealing with the same problems over and over again, and we're actually identifying the root cause and dealing with that. So those would be my 2 areas.
Great. That all sounds a bit haphazard. This evening's meeting, I promise you, every year the budget process is done in a lot more rigour than that, and we look very carefully at the demand, the trends, and so on. But thank you for that input. I'm afraid we've had to reach the end now, and if there are still questions to come, we've got your details, and we'll hope to come back to you on an individual basis. So all it remains is to, on your behalf, thank the team, thank Chief Constable, of course, Gavin, James, and Sergeant Ian Manners, and to say thank you to you and good night. Cheerio.
Thank you all.
Thank you.